Hello and welcome to the final tutorial on Unity. So this is the final one that's part of this course. If you guys want, I could upload some more on various topics like collectibles or camera controls or stuff of that sort. But let's get into it. So in this lesson, we're basically going to be creating a home screen and an ending screen. And now in the last lesson, I mentioned that you should create a couple levels of your own, which I'll get into in a bit. I did make a little... forgot to mention something. So the enemy here before was falling down or was landing on the bottomless pit trigger here and was just kind of staying there. I just made that is trigger, and I did the same thing with next level, so that way nothing will ever like be standing on it like it's an actual object. The other change you'll notice I made is I just made some boundaries. So if we go and hit play, because I have these off screen to the left, let's get rid of the enemy real quick. I can no longer move to the left, and when I go down, I can't move away from the positioning. It's just some quality of life improvements to make the game feel a bit better. I also I think I slightly adjusted the run and jump speed just to work well with what I was trying to create, which you can absolutely do the same. But then you'll walk off the level, and then you'll be put into level 2. And make sure you have a player sprite in every level so you can actually control the game. Similar case here, just have a couple of enemies that we can get rid of. And then we can jump up here. And then the third and final level is, I decided to make it outside, bit of a change of scenery. And then you get, I failed there. But you basically have to get to the end point up here. So if we get up there, and this is where the game will end once we get that implemented. Now the other change I should have mentioned that I kind of forgot to is that we have everything prefabbed here in level 1. I also told you to prefab the tile map grid so you can just drag it in. But when I'm placing the objects in later levels, as soon as I create the prefab, so for example, we'll choose the bottomless pit, I will right click and hit unpack prefab. So that way I can basically change it around and I won't accidentally hit the apply all and then change every single level. So I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that sooner. Sorry if that caused any difficulties, but make sure that if you're ever creating levels, you unpack any prefabs that you had previously. If you don't, unless it's like, say, the player where you might want it, so you're tuning things so you'd want to apply it to every player in the game. But if it's something like a bottomless pit where you might want to adjust like the size of it or something like that, you could make it however big you want, and you might not want to have it that size in every level, then definitely unpack that prefab. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now in our scenes, I've created levels, I'll save that, 1, 2, and 3. And now if we go to File, Build Settings, just like I mentioned last lesson, I have all 3 of them in the build. So that's how I have it. So the next level will immediately go from 1 to 2 to 3. But to start a game, instead of having it just immediately start in level 1, let's create a home screen. So I'm going to do that basically the same way I was doing any other level or scene. I'll create a new scene and I will just call this the menu. Now under menu, it's going to give the pretty basic same thing. So what I want to do just to make it look a bit more interesting beforehand is I'm going to bring in the tile map grid. And on the foreground layer, okay, so this is the error I was talking about. I forgot to unprefab it. So it's going to be like, what are you trying to do? Change in the scene or the prefab? So I'm going to unpack this prefab. And now I'm going to erase the foreground since I don't really need it on a title screen. So I'll grab the eraser and I'm just going to erase that. And I like having the rocks as sort of a background. I think that looks pretty nice. So the thing we'll need on a menu is I'm thinking we should have some kind of title screen at the top and then some kind of like start game button and maybe a quit game button. I think that would work pretty well. So to get started, we will create let's just create the text first. And so to create text, which we haven't done so far, you're going to want to go to UI, and then you see Text and Text Mesh Pro. Text Mesh Pro is a newer version of text, and it's frankly a much better version. It's a lot crisper and clearer, and frankly kind of a bit easier to use. So let's go ahead and create that. So it's going to give us this this notification here that we need to import the essentials, so we can go ahead and do that. Wait for those to get imported. Alright, so now you'll see under our assets, we will have a TextMesh Pro folder, and we don't really need to mess with that at all. It's just good that we have it here. So by creating TextMesh Pro, it'll create a first off a canvas, and underneath the canvas is the TextMesh Pro. And you'll also notice an event system. You can actually just ignore that for now. That's just to help the game basically know that that's UI. So we don't actually need to mess with the event system. We'll just keep it there in the scene. So under the canvas, you'll notice that it is really, really big. And you might be wondering, why is it that big? And why is the text all the way over here, but appearing as if it's all the way down there? And the reason it's this big is that the canvas is kind of made so you can put elements that will never ever be interfered with on the game. So if you want to have a score counter or some kind of live counter or just any type of text or buttons in general, then you can just put them on the canvas and you can kind of keep that separate from the rest of the game, but it'll still appear. So that's sort of why it gives this super big gap, which is, it's kind of hard to explain why exactly. It just, the more you get used to it over time, and it can be kind of helpful. So let's give the game a title. You can title yours whatever you want. I'm just gonna call this the let's see, this is based on a game I made with a friend Jimmy, who I've mentioned a few times in this lesson before, called Surface. So I'm just gonna go ahead and call this Surface Camp Edition. Okay, and so the text is very small right now, so let's make it a bit bigger. So we can drag here on the left these little bars to enable the text to have a bigger area. We don't really need it to be super wide or tall right now, but if we make the font bigger, we might need to do that. Yeah. So as you can see, the letters are starting to get cut off. So if we make it a bit wider, and then we can hit W to move it around. All of this is a lot harder when you're not using TextMesh Pro and using the standard text. So that's why I've always preferred TextMesh Pro. And yeah, I'd say somewhere around there looks like a good place. And now this font, is it really what we want? Is it ideal? Not really. But right now we only have one font in the game. And so you can add other fonts. If you want, you could create an assets folder, call it fonts, and just you can download fonts and just import them like you would do any other images. And then you can just add those to Unity and select them. I'm not going to do that for now just because that's a lot of work, and really, it's not really any different from what we've been doing in the past. So I fully believe that if you want to add any fonts, you definitely have the knowledge right now to do that. So I'm just going to stick with this Liberation Sans SDF material, as they like to call it. And I'll make it a bit bigger, just so it's kind of eye-catching, like, hey, this is the title. Alright, so then what if we made a start button? I'd say that's a nice next place to go. And the way we're going to create a button for the start is to right-click under Canvas, go to UI, and then hit Button. And now there's going to be a bit more that we do with the button, but for now we have our button. We can make it a bit bigger, so I'm just hit R to change the scale. Let's make it, yeah, around that size looks good. Might drag it around a little, play around with that. And you'll see under button, it creates the object text. Now, we'll go over this in a sec, but we're actually going to change that to a TextMesh Pro. So when we press the button, currently it's white, but we can change that right here under normal color. Now there's also the regular color. We're gonna, since it's a button, we're instead gonna change the normal color under the button script. So I'd say for a game, for a start button, I'd say a green color would look nice. Something that doesn't really clash with the background too much. I'm not gonna make it too dark at the beginning. Yeah, around there. For a highlighted color, maybe I'd say maybe a darker green would look good for me. And then the pressed color, so this is the color it'll be when it's pressed in. I'm just gonna do like a dark, like a pretty dark yellow, like almost like a brownish yellow. Now if I hit play, If I put my mouse over the button, it'll turn dark green to say that I'm highlighting it, and if I press, it turns that dark yellow. Alright, so it seems to be working fine. Now for the text, let's delete that, and then under button, when we have that selected, we'll create a child object of UI and type text mesh pro text. And as you can see, it's a lot clearer and a lot easier to work with. And so what we will call this text, we will call it start, because that's what we want the button to do. And I don't really like the white on green, so I'm just going to change that to a black. I think that looks a bit better. So now that we have our start button, the other thing that we should probably have on our home screen is a quit button. So I'm just going to, under canvas, I'm just going to copy this button and then paste it again. So now under canvas, we should have two buttons. Looks like it pasted outside of the canvas. No worries, we can just drag this in. And now it is underneath our canvas. And so if we move this button down, currently it's another start, but we can basically take this. I'm going to bring it in a bit. We'll take the scale. I'm gonna make the quit button a bit smaller, because it's like, well, you really want to quit? I think you'd probably rather start the game than quit it from right off the bat. Yeah, I'd say about that looks good. And then instead of these colors, I will make it red, because that's typically canceling or quitting is associated with red. So I'll start it off light. The darkened version, or the highlighted version, will be a bit darker. And for dark, I'm going to go with a super dark, like maroony type of red. So now if we hit with that, we should also change the text. Instead of start, we will call this quit. So now if we hit play, we can highlight over and hit start, or we could do the same on quit. Alright. And I'm actually going to change the text color just because it does turn a very dark red. I'm going to change the quit's text color here to white. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe make it a bit smaller. Yeah, there we go. I like the look of that. It's a very basic title screen, but it gets the job done. Okay, so now we're going to actually have to say, well, what do these mean exactly? So we're going to create a script, and let's call this script. I'm thinking we can just do one script and just have all the button functions. So let's call this one the button functions. Pretty descriptive name. Open that up in Visual Studio. Okay, so button functions has opened up, and to be honest, we don't really need a start or update function. And you'll see why in a minute, but basically, we're going to write the functions and say on when you press the button to do them, not on start or update. So I'm just going to delete those, make some room. So for our first function, I will say, and for these, it should be a public function because we're accessing them out of Unity. So public void basically allows things outside of just this script to access the function. And we will let's create the start first. So public void, and we can't call it start because that means something else. So public void, how about start game? Okay, so forgot to do the parentheses to say that, yep, that is a function. So under start game, we should basically start the first level. So my idea is that the first scene will be the menu, and then the next scene will be the first level. So really, we just have to update the scene by one. So if you remember, we've done this a couple times before. We have to say that we are using Unity Engine .scene management. And then under start game, if we go back to our player, we basically had to say scene manager.load scene, and the scene we were loading was the scene manager.getActiveScene.build index. In fact, the next level, we did basically, this is an update. I will install that later. In next level, we basically did the same thing, but we built the index +1 for the next scene. So let's just do that again. I'm not going to copy and paste it. Don't feel like being that lazy today, although it is very useful. So we will say scene manager dot load scene, and the scene we're getting will be scene manager dot get active scene parentheses dot build index plus 1. Alright, so that should bring us to the next level. So let's save that, and then let's take this script, go back into Unity, and under, we should actually name these buttons. So this one is the start button. I don't really need to name the text. I think it's pretty clear. The text under start button will say start. Under the quit button will say quit. Let's name this one, though, the quit button. And then under start button, I will just bring in the button functions script. Okay, so now to add it to the button, over here underneath this script that says button, there's going to be the on click. So what does it do when it's clicked? So if we hit plus for an effect, runtime only, that's fine. Then we have to choose the object. So I'm just going to bring in start button, so literally what we're holding right now, into here. And then for the function, I'm going to go to button functions, and then in here we should see start game. Okay, so now if we hit play, hitting start, it's not doing anything. Wonder why. Oh, I know why. It's because we haven't added this to our build yet. So if we go to the build settings, we will add open scenes, the menu. Let's bring this before level 1. So if we hit the start button, the game starts. Excellent. And one change that you'll we'll get into this in a bit in quit, but in Unity the quit button won't do anything because we don't have a program running the game opened, but that will matter when we're actually running the game on its own. And the other thing that'll matter is currently we have the cursor to select the buttons, but in the game we don't need the cursor. So in Unity, right before we load the next scene, we can just say cursor.visible equals false, and this will hide the cursor. And like I said, we won't see this in Unity. We'll only see it when we're actually running the game, which will be the final thing we do in this lesson. So now I said we should create the quit button. So public void, instead of start game, this will be quit game. And then under quit game, let's just say application dot quit, and then do parentheses. Okay. So now let's apply that. Similarly, that we did with the start button, under quit button, we'll hit the plus on the effect. Let's just to keep things consistent, we could technically drag the start button in to here and then access it from start, but just to be consistent and neat, we'll drag in the button functions. And then underneath the object, since we're in the quit button, we'll drag quit button in. And the function will go to the button functions, and now we should see quit game. There it is. Alright, now if we try to test this in Unity, it won't work because we don't have the game open its own program like I've been saying. But that will work once we actually have it open. So now that we have a home screen, let's create an ending screen. And if you haven't created like several levels or however many you want, then I would say take this time to sort of go through that and get those just so you have a game that you can play, even if it's very short like mine is here. So I'm going to create a new scene, and this will be called instead of the menu, this will be the ending. So in the ending, what do we want to do? Well, let's save that up, and I think that we kind of want to just say like, congratulations, or you win, and then we have like we have again like a replay button and a quit button. So I'm actually, now more that I think about it, this sounds very similar to what we have for the menu. So I'm just gonna copy the tile map grid, canvas, and the event system, and I'm gonna bring these into the ending scene. Now we're gonna change those up a bit. I'd say for the tile map, we still don't need a foreground, but if we zoom in all the way there, instead of the rocks, I'm thinking we could have the night sky, because at least that's where my final level takes place. So I think that's a good change of scenery. Let's replace the title with something else. Let's actually name this instead of just Text Mesh Pro Text, let's just call this the end text. And we should probably name the start one the title text. And we'll just say, congratulations. And then underneath, I will just say, you win. And I'm going to center it so it's a bit neater looking. And then over here, if we drag this down a bit, I'd say that looks pretty nice. And then I'm just going to move start and quit down since that's a bit down. Quit we can keep exactly the way it is, but for start, I'm basically going to say, I'm going to basically call this button maybe replay, because we've already played the game. It doesn't make sense to say start again. So underneath start, I'm going to say, for the text instead of start, maybe replay or retry. You won, so I'm just going to say replay. Or play again sounds better, I think. Replay sounds like some kind of old, like, VHS. So play again. I'm going to just make the font a bit lower. I think that'll look a bit better. There we go. Now, there is a problem that you might have thought about, and that is that the script right now says for start to go to the scene +1. And we basically want to say, well, for play again, we just want to go to whatever scene 1 is. Because remember, scene 0 right now is the menu. So scene 1 would be the first level. So I'm going to say public void replay game. And then in here, I'm going to say that we want to do scene, whoops, not just scene manager dot load scene, and the scene we want to load is scene 1. Alright, so now back into Unity. On this button, let's change the effect from the start game over to button functions, and then we will change it to replay game. So let's test that out. So play again. Alright, seems to be working a-okay. And that's working because if we go to the build settings, scene 1 right now is our first level. And let's add this scene in as well. So if we go back into the build settings, I should not have quit out there, add open scenes, and so now we have the ending after scene 3. So now if we go save that up, go into scene 3, I have my next level currently at this little spot here. This should bring me to the end. Whoops, did not mean to die there. But if we do a big jump, there we go, we're in the final scene. And one other bug that you won't notice in Unity, but you would if you started the game, is that our cursor is still hidden. And we basically have to take the cursor and make it unhidden. And the way we can do that is, I know I said to remove the start component, but we're actually going to need it now that I think about it. So void start. And basically start whenever button functions load, so that's either on the menu or on the end screen, since on our end screen, if we go here, underneath the buttons, we have the button function script. All we have to say is cursor dot visible equals true. Alright, save that. So now the cursor will be visible whenever we're on the menus, the starting or ending one, but it won't be visible in the actual game. Alright, so now if you're happy with your game, or even if you wanted to still do some work, you can always just keep editing and keep making newer versions. But I'm actually going to build the game for now. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Build Settings, just to see that all the scenes in the build are correct. We start with the menu, then go level 1, 2, 3, and then the ending. And I'm going to build and run it. So under the target platform we're making it for, currently I'm using a Mac, so I would make it for Mac OS X. There's also Windows and Linux. If you don't have these, you can basically add them from the Unity Hub. But usually you don't need to make it for a platform that you're not using unless you want to share with a friend. If you're wondering, other platforms here, like on Mac, you can create it easily for iOS or the TV. Facebook and WebGL are other ways you can kind of just put the game if you want to put it online. And then if you want to create it on Xbox One or PS4, you kind of need some extra installations and development kits. And you can also download ways to port games to, say, Switch or 3DS or really a multitude of other devices. But the easiest one to do and the way you can actually run it is whatever device you're running on now. So I'm going to build for Mac OS X and run it. Alright, it's going to ask me what I want to save it as and where I want to put this. So I'm just going to call this the camp game, and I'll just put it onto my desktop. So I hit save, it is building. Now, when you're choosing the resolution, you can basically choose it based on not only your screen, but what the game was built for. So here you can see with this view we want right here, it was built for a resolution of 1920 by 1080, which is very standard. That's typically what a lot of things use. So we can just select 1920 by 1080, and then we can hit play. And there we go. It's looking perfect. It fits the screen perfectly. If we hit start, the game will start. And congratulations, you have just created a game with Unity. And you can play it all to your heart's content, and you can feel free to create more games or edit them. And definitely, I encourage you to learn more, because this is basically just scratching the surface of Unity. I've been doing Unity for almost, has it been like 2 years now, and I'm still honestly scratching the surface because there's so much you can do. And if you would like some more lessons later on, probably throughout August, then please let me know. I could teach things like collectible objects, maybe a scrolling camera, sound effects. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in to these tutorials. It really means a lot to me. And definitely share with me what you've created. I'm really curious and I'd love to see. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again.